Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's 3:30 and I'm going to go ahead and call the council work session to order. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Agent.
Here.
Flag.
Here.
Halliburton.
Here.
Willits.
Here.
Weddings.
Here.
All present.
All right, we're going to kick this off with a climate action update. We have Steve Burgos, our Public Works Director, here to present. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good afternoon, council members. Steve Burgos, the Public Works Director, and I'm here to give you an update on climate action. And Steve Hubble back in January gave you an update on the climate action implementation, and he was really focused on the greenhouse gas reduction side of the house. And I wanted to provide some updates on the resiliency side of the house. And I have a graphic that'll describe it here in a second. But the resiliency side of the house is really where we're focused on mitigating the changes that we know are coming, right? So if we look at our climate action priorities on this graphic, which I'm waiting to come up on the big screen.
That's a good question. It's not coming up on our monitors
It's
up
not
here
either.
at the dais either. So I don't know if IT can help with that. It's up here on these screens. Like we can see it, but I don't know if the audience can.
Yeah, I can see it here.
I can only see it right there.
I'll let you. Well, why don't, if you all can, well, I guess we need to wait to, I'm not sure that the public can see the
Oh, yeah.
information.
We'll just take a pause and see. Oh, there's Steve.
There's a very large Steve. Well, maybe Madam Mayor, I can maybe describe kind of what it's not too, it's not a huge revelation. This is a graphic that we've pulled from our climate action roadmap. And so what we have within the priority areas for climate action on the far left is our emission reduction priorities. So those projects that are focused on reducing our carbon, our greenhouse gas emissions. And that's what Steve covered back in January. So those are the projects that are trying to focus on reducing the potential for worsening climate impacts, as opposed to the far right of the graphic, where those projects that we're working on are focused on resiliency. So those are the changes that we know are coming that we have to adjust to. So things like water supply, for example. And so what I want to do this afternoon, Steve really got into the details of the emissions reduction and was able to share the positive news of, for our community greenhouse gas inventory, we're down 3% community-wide within Boise, and that's with the growth that's been happening. That's for year 2020 to 2021. And then for the city operations, Steve shared that we were down about 18% for our city operation emissions. So that was good news, and a credit to Steve and the team for the good work they've been doing. But what I want to do this afternoon was focus on the right side of the graphic. So I'm going to focus on a couple of these priority areas with a couple of examples. I won't go into every one and into too much gory detail, but I just wanted to provide an update there so that you all are aware of the work that we're doing and we're not ignoring the resiliency side of the work. So focusing first on the priority area associated with consumption and waste, there's a lot of really interesting work going on in this area. You can see here, we continue our partnership with Biofusion. They're the company that's developing those buy blocks you may have seen that are making out of the orange energy bag. We continue to send orange energy bags to Biofusion. So that work continues. We have added the opportunity for a commercial / institutional organics recycling. So working with some of the larger companies, grocery stores, some of the larger institutions, we're working with them to get them access to organics recycling. It won't happen, the composting won't happen at our facility south at the farm, because that facility is only permitted for residential compost. But there are other facilities that the institutional and commercial facilities could take their organics to. That will help on some of our diversion programs. Something that you may or may not be aware of, and we don't probably talk about it enough, is that we have a really interesting glass recycling program in the city of Boise. Glass recycling nationally is really challenging. It's a very heavy substance, tough to move around, expensive. Several years ago, we partnered with a company called Enviro Abrasives, and we send our glass recycling that we collect throughout the city to them, and they take that material and turn it into an abrasive material, a silica-free abrasive material. And then they put that on the market and sell that to companies that are doing some type of sandblasting, for example. We divert about 3,800 tons per year to EnviroAbrasives, again, contributing to that bottom line diversion program that we're focused on. And then last but not least, over the past year, we've instituted the demolition and deconstruction ordinance. That's our ability to get contractors engaged on pulling out some of the recyclable material from construction waste. We partnered with PES on that. We've been able to divert about 2,500 tons of salvage of recyclable materials to date. All of this is leading to the goals that we have on our diversion programs. When we started the compost program back in 2017, we set a goal for a 40% diversion rate from residents and businesses in Boise. I'm happy to report in 22 that our diversion rate is about 42%, which is above our goal, and a credit to the staff for all the hard work, and to Boiseans who love these programs. They're very engaged on solid waste programs. And so we're proud of the fact that we were able to get up to 42% for 22.
Madam Mayor, are you okay with questions now as we go along, or do you want to wait to the
What
end?
would you prefer, Steve?
Yeah, whichever you like.
Great.
Yeah, go
Thanks.
ahead.
Steve, I'm really happy to see this. I'm curious because I see it in my own neighborhood. We have new neighbors that are coming in. They're recycling, but they don't really know how to use the orange bags. And so I think it would be really hard to know that all of that work you're going to recycle is then ending up in a landfill because it's not in the right bag. How do we help our new neighbors understand our system?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Willetts, thank you for the question. It's part of, we call it MIMO, the move in, move out process. Down in utility billing, we have very specific information that we provide to new residents. We could probably maybe take a look at that and make sure that we're getting the information that's needed to them. But it's certainly part of that process. We describe the programs, what goes where, and they get information. So for example, on the energy bag program, it's difficult 3 through 7s is what goes in the energy bag. And so we send that information in some of their first bills. So we do try to do that, but it's not easy, especially for somebody coming from somewhere that maybe didn't have access to these wider range of programs.
Follow up?
Yeah.
I'm putting out the suggestion. It may not be efficient, but is there any way to have those who are picking that up alert them, like leave a note, something like that? Because obviously it's getting missed. And I would hate for someone to go through all the energy and think that they're recycling well, only to know that it's ending up somewhere that they didn't intend.
Madam Mayor, Councilor, I'll talk to our utility billing staff and maybe just take a refresh on the information to make sure that we're getting it back to folks.
Thank you.
And then sometimes we forget about, or I forget about, part of our consumption waste program is our biosolids that we take from the water renewal facilities and we deliver to the farm that's located south of the city. So we divert about 4,000 dry tons of our biosolids, our Class B biosolids, down to the farm where we grow local crops that we sell to some of the local dairies, and we put grain on the global markets. And it's all part of that nutrient cycle you see on the left part of the slide, where we're taking the nutrients, the biosolids that we get from our water renewal facilities, land applying them, growing plants, having that go into the food system, and the process starts all over again. The pictures you see on the slide there is some of our crops that we're growing. On the far right is some of the hay that we're growing. And then we also have corn silage that we provide to some of the dairies. And in FY22, our gross revenue was over $5 million at the farm. And that's a record for us. We usually average about 3.2 million, but prices over the past year have been really good to us. For example, the wheat that we sell, I don't know the exact price point, but bushels of wheat last year were going for record prices in part due to the Ukrainian crisis. So sometimes we forget that diversion programs are not just focused on recycling and glass recycling, composting. They're also associated with keeping the biosolids out of the landfill. Another priority area for the climate plan is innovation and engagement. This past fall, we went to INL and got a pretty amazing tour of the facility and really had our eyes open to the wide range of topics that they cover and do significant research into on behalf of the Department of Energy. Out of that process, we've been working with the staff here in Boise, INL staff, but also with the technical staff in Idaho Falls to identify partnering opportunities. We're proud to let you know that we've submitted a DOE grant for our geothermal system to look into some innovative uses. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then we have other partnering opportunities related to technical assistance contracts that we might be able to pursue on microgrids on some of our solid waste programs. So we're working through those. And then this past year in 2022, we completed a geothermal design sprint, going kind of combining the innovation and the engagement part of the climate action roadmap. We had city staff, residents, businesses, technical experts all here in City Hall for several sessions where we just wanted to brainstorm ideas. If you've ever been part of a design sprint process, we try to follow the Bloomberg model on that. And it was a really interesting process, both for staff and for the participants. We had over 100 participants. We've got about 700 ideas or so generated from the various meetings that we held with the residents. And the key question was, how might we expand the use of our geothermal resource? That was the basis of the geothermal or the design sprint. And so out of that came very specific recommendations. A couple I wanted to share with you, some of the actions that came out of the sprint. There was a strong suggestion to increase some of the investment in the geothermal system. So we added an FTE. Thank you for that. You all approved an FTE for FY23. And we're using about 1.3 million of ARPA funding to invest that into the geothermal system. The DOE grant that I mentioned, we are applying for up to $10 million from DOE. The focus is to study the possibilities of and what are the research needs to create both a dual heating and cooling geothermal system. The picture you see on the right there is basically a thermoelectric device that takes heat and turns it into electricity. There are very small devices like this on the market. At some point, hopefully they could scale up. And I'm guessing that part of the work that we'll be doing with INL, if we get the grant, we'll be looking at that type of innovation where we might be able to produce electricity from the heat. And then from the geothermal design sprint, we took a lot of the recommendations from that process and are now integrating that into our strategic plan for geothermal that we'll be back talking to you hopefully in the next couple of months about. Moving on to the natural environment, climate action priority area. Two things I just wanted to highlight. The open space initiatives, you all are very well versed on the initiative writ large on acquiring land, but I just wanted to mention that the Parks Department is doing some really interesting work with Boise State to assess carbon sequestration potential in the foothills related to open space. And if we can show that this is a possibility, there's potential for additional land preservation and restoration that could feed into some of the carbon sequestration approaches that are identified in the climate action roadmap. And then I want to spend a couple of slides on the Enhance the River initiative. This started with the Water Renewal Utility Plan. It was part of the suite of projects that we proposed to you all and got approved back in October of 2020. The focus is really on addressing habitat and preservation and restoration along the lower Boise River. The hope is that we'll be able to use more natural approaches to address very specific water quality issues. For example, temperature. We know the temperature issues are becoming more and more significant on river systems throughout the United States. The lower Boise River is no different. We have the lower Boise is impaired for temperature. And so part of our process with DEQ and the new permits that we were negotiating is that we really didn't want to have mechanical solutions at the end of the pipe, i.e. Chillers and cooling towers. One, they're really expensive. Two, they use a lot of power. And three, they don't necessarily address large scale issues. They're very temporal fixes for maybe a half a mile, quarter of a mile in the river. So we proposed back to the DEQ, what if we pursued some of these natural project restoration, habitat restoration, preservation projects in lieu of chillers and cooling towers? So as part of that work over the last 2 years, staff has been developing what's called a habitat suitability mapping tool. We've completed this for the main stem of the Boise River. And so what you're looking at on the right side is a graphical depiction of the river based on criteria that we're evaluating on habitat suitability for, in this case, I believe this is juvenile rainbow trout. And where you see red areas, those areas are not conducive to juvenile rainbow trout habitat. And so that would not be an area where they could kind of hang out and be happy. The yellow areas are okay and the green areas are high. What this allows us to do is to start to target projects in the lower Boise River and investment in projects to fix some of those red areas where we might see longer stretches of red. How do we then go in and try to repair those areas? We're working with several outside agencies and trying to partner and leverage funding. So folks like Trout Unlimited, Boise River Enhancement Network, I won't read all those, you can read those, but the partnering opportunities are pretty exciting. And so as we move forward, we're identifying very specific projects that will be coming on an annual basis to you and proposing to complete in the Boise River. One such example is the Loggers Creek project. So Loggers Creek is a diversion off the main stem of the Boise River. It's in southeast Boise. On the right, you see pictures of staff. I believe on the top picture, they're looking for some freshwater clams. Mussels rather. And then on the bottom picture is a depiction of the diversion dam that's blocking fish passage. The grant that we're applying for through this, through the Bureau of Reclamation's Water Smart program is to do work along Loggers Creek to help enhance fish passage around these diversion dams, but also enhance some of the habitat that's along Loggers Creek. And we're partnering with some local nonprofits to try to make that happen and get that grant to do that work.
Madam Mayor.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes.
Steve, on both the river enhancement and the foothills carbon sequestration, is it true that some of the work will include some tree planting?
Yes.
You won't
Madam
be
Mayor.
surprised that I'm asking.
Yeah, yes, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, absolutely. That'll be a big part of the work. Because if we can start establishing the carbon credits related to tree planting, that could help us address some of those. There'll be things that are going to be difficult for us to address on carbon emissions. So we might need in the future carbon trades or carbon offsets. Those plantings would help develop a carbon base to do that.
Thank you. Just let you know that I intend to continue to be involved in that however I can. So excited to see those moving forward.
Yep.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. So that's the Enhance the River examples of some of the work we're doing related to the natural environment. Again, temperature mitigation is becoming a bigger issue and will continue to be so into the future. So how do we set up the river to be resilient to those temperature issues and also drought conditions, et cetera. And then last but not least on the priority areas is water. And this past spring, in fact, it was March, that the pilot equipment arrived out at the Micron parking lot. We were really excited about this particular project. This is our advanced water treatment pilot. We're partnered with Micron Technologies. They've been a great partner. They've given us a spot out at a parking lot out at Micron where we've got the technology. We've got 3 trailers located there. You can see them being delivered. And they're also working with us to allow us to divert some of their existing wastewater effluent so we can use that for the testing of removal efficiencies and the advancement of the technology and the viability of the technology. We hope we'll be up testing and having tours in the May-June timeframe. Tours probably not until June, but we're going to start it up likely in May, hopefully even sooner. Some of the other partners we have, the University of Idaho, we're partnered with Dr. Coates up there to do research and development on the brine management piece. So we're going to take some of the waste product from the advanced treatment and test that brine to see what's in it. We're partnered with the National Water Research Institute, NWRI, to help us frame up how we can use this information to better engage the community on concerns maybe around emerging constituents, for example. And then Veolia is also the technology partner. They're providing the treatment technology for us. So they're going to be a partner in some of the testing and proving out of the technology. The pilot supports several goals that we have in the recycled water program. I won't go through each one of these. I just want to cover a couple of these. The transparency and water quality data is a really important one to us. On the community engagement side, we've heard some concerns about the emerging constituents. In particular, PFAS is one that people have brought up, citizens have brought up. So part of the pilot test will be looking at and testing our ability to remove PFAS compounds using the different treatment components. I'm going to show you here in a second the different types of technology we're testing. We think that that'll help us on the upper right increase some of the stakeholder confidence. So when we talk about the recycled water program and the potential for aquifer recharge, that we've done the testing, we have the data sets that prove up that the technology is doing what we need it to do. And then last but not least, I'll just point to the bottom right, that developing of the data will help us optimize the design. We may not need all the technology I'm going to show you here in a second. We may need only 3 of the 5 and in a certain combination of technology we don't know yet. That's the point of the pilot, to try to really help us optimize the final design on the recycled water facility. So these are the 5 major technologies that we'll be testing out at the facility. These are our cutting edge wastewater treatment technology. Some of this has been used in the drinking water world, but not necessarily applied to wastewater. And we like to think that wastewater is a little bit more of a challenge. It's got more stuff in it, if you will. And so the ability to use this technology for what we needed to do is going to be really a fun experiment for us. So I won't get into any of the details of these, but air strippers, ultrafiltration, reverse osmosis, granulated activated carbon or GAC, and then ultraviolet advanced oxidation process will be included. And again, will be different combinations, different types of water that we're running through this. We'd love to have you out to visit the pilot, hopefully in June. We're trying to get it set up and running and get it prettied up a little bit for when folks come out and get tours. So then coming back full circle to Steve Hubble covered the reduction side, the carbon reduction side. That was a quick overview of some of the resilience work that we're doing. And with that, I'll stand for any questions that you may have.
Madam Mayor. Steve, one other question I had. I know that when we designed the Orange Bag program, part of the issue that we were having with recycling was that our MRF was not a very sophisticated one. I assume we still have that same one. Wondered if there's any plans to do anything to upgrade that.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, no plans that we're aware of. We have periodic meetings with Western Recycling and Republic Services. We're not aware of any upgrades that they're proposing at this time, but we're probably due for a meeting with them, so I can follow up with you and see if there's any new proposals at the MRF or any new technology.
Yeah, I mean, with all this success, it's great. We've diverted a lot. I think recycling still tends to be across the nation, across the world, the nut that nobody's quite cracked. So maybe we turn our attention there next.
And Madam Mayor, I would add, Councilmember Clegg, that in 2024, we're proposing to do a new strategic plan for solid waste program with a real emphasis on reduce and reuse. So how do we get upstream of recycling and trash?
Yeah.
That most major cities, I guess us included, to the extent that we have really good kind of recycling programs, but what about the upfront to reduce the quantities that are coming in? And so that new strategic plan that'll start next year is going to be focused on the reduce and reuse piece. You can definitely argue that expanding the recycling programs maybe you're just trying to deal with the back end of it. What about getting up in front of it? So we're going to see what we can pull off.
That's great. Thanks.
Steve, can you just remind us real quick what MRF means? I have a
Material-
hard time keeping my acronyms
Sure.
straight sometimes.
Madam Mayor, material recovery facility. Some people say material recycling facility, but a MRF.
Great, thank you.
No problem.
I have a question about how you'll test that wastewater facility. Are you just going to kind of bring in some sample effluent from other places, or what is that going to look like?
Madam Mayor, thanks for the question. We're going to partner with Micron to divert a certain amount of flow off of their existing pipeline that's coming into our existing system. So we'll take, I don't know what the flow rates are, but they're not very large. We'll take some of the actual flow and just divert it into this system. So we'll do testing on that water quality up front, that diverted water, and then we'll run it through the system, test water quality on the back end. Those data sets will tell us, and then we'll do it for different combinations. We'll turn it off for a second, maybe rearrange some of the technology, run the test again. We'll have sampling that happens in between processes. But to answer your question, it's going to be Micron water, current Micron discharge water that will divert off of their current pipe.
I mean, I know that we often say that stuff like wastewater is not super exciting, but I think that that's really cool. So for anyone who's listening, we're hiring wastewater technicians right this very moment, and you can be part of this really cool and innovative program.
Thank you for the plug.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks, Steve. Unless you have anything else, we'll welcome up Rebecca Hupp to talk about the airport.
That's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. The sun came out.
Yeah, it's great.
What is this showing?
Good afternoon.
The sun came out just for you, Director Huff.
Well, it can't make up its mind if it is summer or spring or winter here these days, it seems like. Because I think I saw at least a couple different seasons on my way to City Hall this afternoon from the airport. So, well, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, thank you so much for allowing me to be here this afternoon and share with you some of the exciting things that are happening at the airport. And I have my presentation pulled up. I hope you can see it on your screens. And then I believe a member of city team is helping with the online, so it's here. So I thought I would divide our discussion today into a couple of few key areas. One, air service achievements, then some airport improvement infrastructure, things that we're working on, some properties and tenant updates, and then just some other notable achievements. And I have probably about 25 slides, so I'm intending to go through this quickly, but if you have questions, feel free to stop me along the way, and then we can also do Q&A at the end. So you've heard me talk about this before, but the trend continues. 2022 was our busiest year on record. Passenger travel was up 9% compared to 2019, which was the previous record, obviously pre-pandemic. And our passenger numbers in 2023 continue that trend. They were up about 22% in January and 16% in February. So we're up about 20% year to date. We don't have the final numbers for March, but we do expect to see substantial increases in passenger numbers in March, just based on the throughput that we're seeing through the TSA checkpoint. I've been before the council in the recent past talking about our airline use and lease agreements, and we have successfully renegotiated our use and lease agreements. A couple of the changes that are most important are including a gate standard, gate utilization standard. So we're using our existing gates more effectively, and then also focus on retaining revenue at the airport so we can reinvest in our infrastructure moving forward. We did have a couple of successes this past year. We introduced 2 new airlines, which is, I can't tell you the last time we introduced 2 new airlines in Boise. I think the last time we introduced a new airline in Boise was in 2012 when Allegiant started. Since then, we haven't introduced any new, well, JetBlue when they were here. But this year we introduced Spirit and Avelo. Spirit added daily service to Las Vegas, and Avelo offered service to Burbank 3 times a week. And I would note that Alaska also added service to Burbank and Long Beach. And then we also have Chicago Midway returning in September of this year. And another key destination for us is Atlanta, and Delta has added frequency to the Atlanta seasonal service. And we also had Clear that we welcome to the Boise Airport, and this is an amenity that passengers enjoy at numerous airports across the country. It is an expedited screening process. Passengers can provide either a fingerprint or an eye scan, and it allows them to go through an expedited screening process. Thank you, Councilor Badgen, for coming out and participating in that with us. We had simple flyings. Most recovered airports. Boise made the top 10 list. As you can see on the list, most of these airports were either beach or mountain destinations that benefited from increased leisure travel during the pandemic. 40 U.S. airports have more capacity than they did pre-pandemic, with Boise coming in 10th place in a list of fastest growing. So based on that, and knowing that we have a number of projects coming up that will be impacted by the number of passengers that we need to serve, we asked our consultant to develop a passenger forecast for us for 5 years. And traditionally, we'll use a low, base, and high forecast. The low was based on an 83% load factor of existing capacity, which is about our average. So we're predicting about a 4% increase this year as our base, and then projecting that over the 5-year, or excuse me, the 10-year planning horizon. And we've talked before about capital projects that we're working on at the airport. The public parking garage, this opened this past summer. So if you've been out there since, I believe it was August, you've had an opportunity to go through our new exit plaza, but this will help traffic flow at the airport. And then the public parking garage, if you've been out there, you've seen it changes daily, but we have reached the highest point of construction, the topping off point on the east garage, and the crane will be coming down. It will be on track to open this summer. The employee garage, which is the one that is most visible from the interstate, continues. It's being built in parallel with the public parking garage. We bid these two projects together to give us a better economy of scale, and this is on track to be completed in late 2023. Probably one of the most significant pinch points that you can see at the airport, in addition to parking, is our security checkpoint. And we expanded this checkpoint this year to add a 7th lane. It allows us, again, to add a designated pre-check lane. And what we did is we remodeled the gift store, the news and gift store that was there. We took that out and added additional queuing in that area. And yet to come, we expect to do a groundbreaking on our consolidated rental car facility. This will be within walking distance of the terminal. Phase 1 includes a walkway, ready return, and staging areas, as well as customer service lobbies. We expect that we'll break ground on this project once we complete the public parking garage. So it's all about phasing and timing of these different projects. One of the projects that we try to do at least one every year is we call it a VALE project. It's a voluntary airport low emission project. It allows us to eliminate and reduce emissions at the airport. This particular one will allow us to condition aircraft air without doing ground idling of the aircraft. This will be installed on the west cargo apron. And this year we were awarded nearly $1 million in FAA grants under the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. This will be for adding an energy efficient electric boiler for the terminal that needs to be added to accommodate new Concourse A when it comes in. And then also updating the skylights to prevent heat gains and losses throughout the year. And this was part of that airport terminal program. It's discretionary funding. Another project that we talked about last year that we have since completed is the Amazon Taxi Lane Sierra, as we like to call it. It's on the southeast corner of the airfield adjacent to SkyWest. And we invested in the common use areas like the cargo apron, the taxi lane, and improvements to Gowan Road. Amazon was responsible for their own investment in their own building and infrastructure. Originally, that taxi lane was built to accommodate the regional jets that were going to SkyWest, but this required an expansion so we could accommodate larger aircraft on that taxi lane. Another project that we had presented to council before but have since completed is our non-aeronautical master development agreement. This is for parcels that are owned by the airport but are not aviation specific. They are noise buffer properties that we have acquired over the years. And so we entered into an agreement with council's approval with Adler. And we have two projects that are currently under construction. And you can see a picture of a groundbreaking that was earlier this year, and then where we are today with the construction on that. One thing we definitely learned from the pandemic is the need to diversify our revenue. The non-aeronautical property will be an important part of that, but I wanted to include just a summary of some of the new revenue that we introduced this year moving forward that we didn't see last year. Just under $4 million in new revenue over a variety of sources, from new services such as valet parking, the Uber Lyft agreements that we've negotiated, new airline use and lease agreements, new services by Amazon. All of those things contribute to a very healthy and diversified bottom line. And as I alluded to, curbside valet parking is now available. This came out of the need to accommodate substantial passenger growth. beyond what had been forecast. And we now have 260 spaces that we've added specific to valet parking. It's been very, very popular. The average customer rating is 4.9 out of 5, and 22% of the customers that we saw in February were repeat customers, and they stay an average of 3.77 days. So this has allowed us to expand our parking capability without adding new spaces. We also are in the process of implementing what we're calling passenger facility charge application number 7. It's not really a very creative name, but this speaks to the fee that gets charged onto an airline ticket. When you buy your airline ticket from an airline, it allows us to reinvest those funds into airport infrastructure. You can see there's a variety of projects, but it's a $4.50 fee that we use to again, expand our existing infrastructure. And this is a list of projects that we've identified through that process. And then customer facility charge is very similar. It's a fee that gets added on to rental car contracts. We've talked about this before. It's currently at $6.50 a day. And then this will go to pay for the design and construction of that consolidated car rental facility. And our bond rating was affirmed, which is not always the case for all airports, but they've reaffirmed Boise Airport's bonds at A+, and our subordinate bonds at A, with the rationale that we have strong employment growth, revenue diversification, and then strong financial historical metrics. And BOI was listed as one of the most punctual airports in the country. And part of this has to do with our great weather. Part of it has to do with our great team and our great partners. Some of it seems like we probably don't have a lot of control over, but the things that we do have control over, we make sure that we do a good job with that. Has to do with our lighting systems that we have where aircraft can land in very low visibility. It's important as a passenger, but it's also exceptionally important to our airline partners as they plan their routes. So those were the highlights from 2022. I'm going to briefly touch on some of the things that we're going to work on in 2023. Our BOI upgrade will continue to take shape with the completion this year of our public garage, our employee garage, and then the groundbreaking for the consolidated rental car facility, as well as design, hopefully beginning this year for the Concourse A expansion. We also will continue to work on airfield development. There are a number of things that have changed in the FAA design circular where we have to modify existing airfield infrastructure and remove things. This will be part of that ongoing conversation and ongoing process. And then beyond the construction, we're doing a number of different things. One is a runway incursion mitigation environmental assessment. We'll also be looking at the feasibility of electric shuttle bus and charging. And we will also be working with our airline stakeholders to look at a fuel farm that will be under construction at the airport. Hopefully, we'll be able to start that this year. It's a fairly complex project where they will lease property from the airport so that way they can have a larger and more substantial fuel storage facility on the airport to accommodate their growing flights. And then we'll also be working on some RFPs this year. One will be for parking management. Parking is our largest revenue generator at the airport. And so we want to make sure we have a good partner for our parking management. That contract expires this year. Also, our concessions RFP will expire next year. So we'll be working on selecting a new partner for our concessions. So think news and gift and food and beverage. And then we'll also be updating our rental car agreements again, so we can align with that new consolidated car rental facility. And then for bonding, we'll be issuing revenue bonds for the consolidated car rental facility. We'll issue bonds and then we'll repay the bonds using that CFC that I mentioned earlier. And I would be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Rebecca. Any questions for Rebecca on airport? All right, well then I have one. So when you're going through pricing and determining what you're going to charge, like say for rental car fees or for, parking fees, how do you, what's the process you go through to determine what that's going to be?
We generally will look at industry averages for particular airports in the Northwest. So we'll look primarily at Reno, Spokane, some other Intermountain West cities, perhaps Salt Lake. When we're talking about parking fees, we'll look at other parking fees in the city to make sure that we're comparable. And then on the car rental fees, the CFC, we look at a larger section, again, of comparable airports that are of similar size to make sure that we're in line with what the industry norm is.
That's great. And I'm just going to note that even though $23 sounds like kind of a lot for parking, it's still way cheaper than missing your flight. And that valet has saved my bacon a couple of times.
Well, in Valet, we offer a variety of parking fees. So if someone is very cost conscious and they want to save some money, they can park in the economy lot and take the shuttle in. For passengers that want to park closer in, they can pay the garage fee. And we did specifically add the valet for that exact reason, because passengers sometimes do not plan or things don't go according to their plan. And then they find themselves at the airport being concerned about missing a flight, and valet gives them one more option, to be able to park at the Boise airport.
I think it's a great suite of options that you've provided. And every time I go to the airport, I'm always impressed with the growth and how smoothly things are operating. I think that we get very spoiled here in Boise when it comes to lines at TSA and other things. So thank you for your work and all of your team's work.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
just a quick comment to further heap praise on Rebecca. One of the things that I think has been great about Valet is because the parking garage is at such a premium, and because we've seen such a spike in air travel, sometimes it's the only option you have or you miss your flight. So thank you for coming up with lots of different options as we try to mitigate these growth pains, because I do think it's showing that the city is responsive, the airport is responsive. We understand people are frustrated, but at the end of the day, we're going to have a much better system. We just have to try to work our way through it. So thank you.
Thank you. We were really excited about how popular Valet has been. I will tell you, when we started Valet, we started with 80 spaces, and we thought we would be happy if we could fill all of those. And as I mentioned, we're up to 260 spaces in Valet. So it has been incredibly popular for all of the reasons that you state. And also there's a segment of our traveling passengers who like that valet service, and it's convenient for them. Either they have someone with a disability, they want to go right to the curb, they have a family with small children, they don't want to go out to the shuttle lot at midnight, whatever their rationale. It's an option that they have for that segment of passengers that wants that service.
That's great. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, thank you so much, Rebecca.
All right. Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move that we go into executive session to consider personnel records exempt from public disclosure and pending or probable litigation pursuant to Idaho Code Section 74-206, 1B, D, and F.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Whittings,
Yes.
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Willits,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
All right. We'll go into executive session and we will return at 6 p.m.